Hello again. Good afternoon, precious friends. Welcome back to Aunt Petty's Kitchen on the Carnivore Hippie. And today we're going to start with the first video. I'm going to do it in two videos because I don't want any 45-minute long videos. That's just too much. But the first video in our great taco experiment recipe. I know I promised you this several days ago. But we are going to make, believe it or not, carnivore tacos inspired by the carnivore noodle recipe that we did a couple of videos ago. Been experimenting with this batter. It turns out to be super versatile, and I cobbled together, I hesitate to call it a tortilla because it really isn't a tortilla, but it works as a carnivore taco shell. Let me just say that. So we're going to get started and talk about this video is going to be about the carnivore tortilla taco shells, or whatever it is. You can also cut them up and make noodles out of them if you want to do that, but this is a little bit different than the last recipe, although you can use the first recipe that we went over to make the taco shells, but I've altered it a little bit. What we've got here, I apologize, we're back in the booth in the back in the corner of the dark, filming wise, but the only pan that I have that's an appropriate cooking surface for making taco sized tortillas is this one, and it's a great pan and I love it, but it is aluminum, and so it is not compatible with my induction countertop cook surface, so we're gonna be stuck over here for this particular video. I went shopping for one. I haven't found one of the appropriate size that I like yet, so this is what we're stuck with for now. So bear with me. Over here, well, that's our hardware, basically, is this. And, of course, a container to blend in and our stick blender, just like the last time with the noodle recipe. Our software is pretty straightforward. We have here 7 ounces of water, just under 200 milliliters, and you can measure this by measuring out a cup of water and taking out 2 tablespoons, or 3/4 of a cup of water and adding 2 tablespoons. Either way, whichever way is easier for you. 1 whole egg goes right in there. Out half a cup of our chicken flour, and that's just by volume. Let's see, we have our 5 tablespoons of egg white powder. Whoops, excuse me. This stuff is sticky, so I'm going to use my little pastry brush since I haven't gotten it wet yet. Don't try to do this with a wet pastry brush. You'll regret it. And here we have our 1 tablespoon instead of 2 tablespoons of plain gelatin. And here we have just some seasonings that I'm trying to not so much make it taste like a tortilla, but to kind of overpower some of the other flavors that are distinctly un-tortilla-like, like the egg flavor and the chicken flavor. This is a 1/4 of a cup of a quarter of a teaspoon of onion powder and a 1/4 of a teaspoon of cumin powder, which are both decidedly taco-y tasting. So there's that. Now, before we put the stick blender in it, we're going to stir it up a little bit to get all of our egg white powder moistened. You really don't want to put a stick blender down on top of all this dry egg white powder because it will create a cloud. And aerosolized egg white powder is just not something that you want to inhale. despite the fact that it makes a horrible mess. So there's that. Now all you have to do is make sure that all the egg white powder is wet. Now that we've got it all in a lovely mush, we're going to hit it with the stick blender. I'm going to scrape the sides down a little bit just to make sure we got everything. Now it starts off pretty loose and watery looking, very thin, but it will thicken up somewhat as we go along. It is going to be about the consistency of a thin crepe batter. Okay. Now, when you're mixing this, you don't want to lift the immersion blender too high so that you don't want to introduce a lot of air. You can see that there is some air. There's some foam here, but not too much. If you lift the immersion blender too high or work it up and down too much, you'll have a big layer of foam, and that's going to be inconvenient for you. It'll still work, but you'll have very, very lacy tortillas. And if that's what you're going for, I suppose it has its applications. But anyway, that's not what we're going for today. So here we have a pan that's been heating. It's been heating over low heat so it doesn't get overly hot. So I'm going to crank up the heat to medium. And I have over here some ghee. And I'm going to brush the pan with ghee. When you're just starting out, the very first one you make, you want to make sure your pan is pretty liberally oiled. After you get going, you tend to need less. Now, I don't like to get my pan too hot with regard to these. I've heard people say you have to get the pan real hot when making these. They do cook faster that way. But I also think it's harder to spread the batter if the pan is too hot. So, the way I've been doing it is taking the pan off of the burner and pouring the batter in the middle of the pan, just in a thin stream, and shaking the pan until you have a thin coating, just like that. It does take a little practice, frankly. This is how I like to do it. You can use a measuring device like a 1/4 cup measure or a 1/3 of a cup measure to measure out the batter and swirl it around the pan. I'm just having better luck eyeballing it. Fair warning, this is going to take some practice. So if you like to cook, go ahead and do this a couple of times. But yeah, it's going to take a little practice, but it's going to be worth it, I swear. Here we go. Now we're going to let this cook until the top is pretty dry. You see I could touch it. It doesn't leave any marks in the top. And then we're going to, and you'll see, I don't know if you can see the edges are curling back. See? From the sides. And we're going to loosen it. Oop, I tore that one. Going to loosen it with our spatula. This is the first one. The first one sometimes sticks. Don't let it get to you if it does. That happens even to the most practiced of us. Just work at it from different angles until you can get the sticky spot. Okay, I'm going to actually oil this a little bit more. And then flip it. Put it back on the heat. That one has a tiny hole in it. You know what? I'm not going to let it bother me because the first one almost always comes out messy. Gosh, it's happens so regularly, it's practically a tradition. And I'm getting myself a rack while we wait for that to finish cooking. And then once it's finished cooking on this side, I like to turn it back over for just a second. You hear the sizzle? Just to dry it out a little more. Just until the sizzling subsides some. It'll sizzle a lot and then the sizzling will subside. And it's almost completely stopped sizzling, and I'm going to take it out and put it on our rack. Okay, once again, our heat, my heat is on 4, which is dead in the middle of my dial, which is medium. So I'm going to take it off the heat, lubricate, batter, so like I said, it does take practice. I practiced this probably, geez, this has got to be, I think, the 4th time I've made these. But if they're funny shaped or they have a few holes in them, you know what? It doesn't matter. As my mom always said, it's all going down the same pipe. I mean, there's something to be said for food looking pretty when you're going to eat it. But, you know, as long as it tastes good, I think we're in good shape. So here you can see again, top is dry. It doesn't leave a mark when I touch it. And you can see the second one has come loose much more easily than the first one, like I told you it would. And turn over. Little bit brown. I don't know if you can see it. Just slightly golden brown. That's fine. It can be a little browner. It can be a little less brown. That doesn't really matter much. So we're gonna. This cooks about maybe 30 seconds on this side. I don't know if you can see. It's still. See if I can't get the light to reflect on it. No, it's pretty moist. You can tell that it's still pretty moist on top, even though it's been cooked. So now we're going to turn it over and hear the sizzle. We're just going to let it sit until the sizzling subsides mostly. Doesn't have to subside altogether, but it goes from to, if you know what I mean. I hope you can hear it. The sizzling is subsiding. And it has subsided to where it's just a very quiet little crackle, and I'm going to take it out. Okay? And we're just going to keep doing this until all our batter is used up. I'm going to do it one more time. Take the pan off the heat, lubricate, There you go. The more you practice, the thinner you can get them. It's really cool to make them pretty thin because they get crispier when you make tacos out of them. But if you end up them being kind of fat, that's okay too, because they'll still be delicious and they'll still make good tacos. Now these tacos, they're not going to be crispy taco shells like prefab corn tortilla shells that you would buy from, you know, the big Mexican food companies like Ortega or La Tapatía or La Rosarita or a number of other ones. They're not going to be like that. But they are going to be very useful and delicious. So here we go. We're going to turn. Boop. And sizzling has... You'll see steam coming up off the top of the tortilla. And when that happens, after the first flip, you'll know that it's done. And then second flip. I just stick my fingers down in the pan and move them around to make sure that they're not sticking. I suppose I could do it with the spatula, but you know. I'm stupid enough to put my fingers in the pan. So over onto the rack. Now, once these have cooled off to close to room temperature, you can go ahead and stack them up. If you stack them while they're hot, they'll get humid and they might get a little bit soggy. So just wait till they cool a little bit, till they're like room temperature, and stack them up. I'm going to go ahead and finish making this batch of tortillas. This batch of batter will probably make between 6 and 8 tortillas depending on how thin you get them. If you can get them super thin, you might be able to get more than that out of them. It all has to do with how much batter you use per tortilla, actually. Oh, obviously. So I'm going to put the video on pause, and I'm going to finish up this batch of tortillas, and I will see you in just a few minutes. Hang with me. Hi again. You know what? I almost forgot to tell you. Stir your batter in between your crepes, or else the chicken flour may settle to the bottom. And then you'll be about halfway through your batter and you'll find that your batter's become real thick and gloppy. So stir your batter in between every crepe or after every like 2 crepes so that you won't have that problem. And I am going to go ahead and finish up this batch. I'll be right back. I'm back. And so I've saved my last dose of batter to kind of show you one of the glitches that can happen and how really you just don't need to worry about it. If it happens to you, it happens to you. It probably will. Just don't let it bug you. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. So I've already lubed this up. We put it on the pan, we put it on heat, and if it gets a little bit too hot, or because you're not practiced, you know, if you haven't practiced enough quite yet, you haven't quite gotten the hang of it, sometimes this can happen where you're dosing out your batter and something weird happens and oh, you get a hole. You get a hole. Now, sometimes you can fix it by just shaking the pan. But if the batter has already set and there's not enough liquid left to just shake the pan and fill the hole, you know what you can do? Just take your little poury thing and you can just very gently, there you go, just fill it right up, just like that. And, you know, even if you elect not to fill the hole, really doesn't matter. You can still make a taco out of it. You can cut it up for noodles. It's just really not a big deal. Never let perfection be the enemy of sufficient. It's not a big deal, so don't worry about it. So it looks like we have even maybe, I usually have enough left over to make like a baby one, a half size or 3/4 size one, and I just usually go ahead and make it. Sometimes just to facilitate it, I put a little tiny bit extra water, like maybe 2 teaspoons of water in here. There's like maybe 2 tablespoons, maybe a tiny bit more of batter left. And I just put like a teaspoon or 2 of water in it to loosen it up a little bit. Because most of the water is going to cook out anyway. And then we'll just cook our last little thing. And it'll be a little partial one, but that's okay. So another thing I wanted to show you is this. Put it up where you can see. You can see the craters, the laciness of it. This was what happened when the pan was too hot and the batter set too quickly. This is not a big deal. You just take the pan off the heat for, 10, 15 seconds, lower the heat on your stove a little bit, and, you can just use it just like this. Don't let this laciness bother you. It's still perfectly good and perfectly edible. Not everything has to be perfect, as I said. So that's another kind of glitchy thing that can happen. Just, as I said, take the pan off the heat and lower the heat on your stove just a little bit to correct that. So that's our last. We got 8. We got 8 crepes out of this, taco shells out of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We got 8 of them, which is what I expected, plus a little bit more. So we're going to just go ahead and use up the rest of our batter to make our little leftover baby tortilla. And it's going to be, it's going to be super thin, but it made a whole one. We may not get it. It's so thin. I have to tell you, we may not get it all the way out of the pan in one piece, but that's okay. The edges are like super, super, super tissue thin. So I'm just going to scrape them down a little bit. Hopefully they'll solidify a little bit so we'll be able to get the whole thing out of the pan in one piece. That's super, super thin. Thinner than I expected. Now I'm putting some water in my measuring cup that I was pouring from because the gelatin and the eggs in this mix, if you let it air dry, it's so difficult to clean. So please, rinse. Oh my goodness, this is super thin. I wonder if it's going to come off. Now it's become a personal issue. Oh my goodness. Uh-oh. Ah, I did it. It became a personal challenge to see if I could get that flipped. I don't think it'll make a taco, but that's fine. It'll make a noodle or two. I just don't like wasting the batter. So here we go. Here is all of our little tortillas. And we're gonna boy, that would be something if I could figure out how to make those that thin all the time. There's a bunch of things you could do with that, I think. Anyway, that's it. We're done. So, here, I know they really do look like tortillas, but I hesitate to call them tortillas because I don't want anybody like to bite into one and go, oh, that doesn't really taste like a tortilla, because, you know, they don't particularly taste like tortillas. But when you fry them up and you put the filling inside them and you dress it up with whatever kind of taco fillings you like, it really does fill the taco niche in my spirit, which is fabulous because I have been known to take well, I hesitate to call it a cheat day, but I've been known to eat off plan just because I just really, really wanted a taco. And if this can lessen those days, the amount of those days where I just feel like I need a taco, then yeah, I'm all into that. So we will be back soon to make use of these darling little darlings. Until then, I will see you very, very soon. And we are going to have a great deal of fun next time. See y'all later. Bye.